This week on the Downsized News, Washington takes on drug shortages with a new bill that could change how compounding pharmacies step in when shelves go bare. Novo Nordisk announces 9,000 layoffs. What does it mean for the company that once dominated GLP-1 market and for patients depending on their drugs? A new study offers reassuring news for thyroid cancer patients using GLP-1s. And the FDA cracks down on drug advertising after years of glossy commercials and fine print. Then, from Oprah to Serena Williams, we'll show you how celebrity confessions are driving real spikes in GLP-1 prescriptions, plus the Ozempic effect shows up in America's closets, and scientists unveil a brand new triple agonist that could reshape the future of obesity treatment. It's a full week of GLP-1 news you won't want to miss.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Downsized News. It's Monday, September 15th, 2025, and we're glad you're here. Today we're diving into the latest on GLP-1s. I'm Laraine Durham, and I've lost over 50 pounds with the GLP-1 drug Retatrutide. This journey has changed my life, and I'm here to help you feel informed, empowered, and supported every step of the way. So if you're ready for the latest news and updates with a little splash of motivation, stick around for updates you may not see anywhere else.
And I'm Christopher Durham, and I've lost 100 pounds on this adventure with GLP-1s. What we share here is our real experience. It's not theory. We're here to share the real story about the medications that have changed our lives, the news shaping our access, the challenges along the way, and the science bringing new options.
If you're new to our channel, welcome. And if you've been with us for a while, welcome back. We always like to remind everyone that we are not doctors, but we have lost weight with the help of GLP-1 medications. We share videos on GLP-1 topics every single day, so make sure to hit that like and that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode.
From Mounjaro and Zepbound to Wegovy and Ozempic, from semaglutide to tirzepatide, and even the new GLP-1s in development, we cover them all. From the latest research and policy changes to new medications on the horizon, we're here to break down what really matters for those of us treating the disease of obesity.
In story number one, in Washington, two pharmacists turned lawmakers are working to shore up America's fragile drug supply chain. Congresswoman Diana Harshbarger of Tennessee and Congressman Buddy Carter of Georgia introduced a bill this week with a name that says exactly what it's about: the Drug Shortage Compounding Patient Access Act of 2025. For anyone who lived through the GLP-1 shortages of Zepbound, Mounjaro, and Wegovy, the stakes are clear. When the shelves went bare, it was compounding pharmacies that often stepped in to fill the gap and keep patients on treatment. And while GLP-1s may be the example most familiar to our community, the problem is much bigger. At this moment, more than 200 drugs are officially in shortage across the United States. For patients, that can mean empty pharmacy shelves or a canceled treatment. For hospitals, it often means scrambling for alternatives. And for families, it can mean fear and frustration. Harshbarger, who spent decades behind the counter as a pharmacist, framed it this way: as a pharmacist, I know the devastating impact drug shortages can have on patients, families, and hospitals. This legislation ensures when conventionally manufactured drugs aren't available, American compounding pharmacies have clear authorities and flexibilities to step in. Her colleague Buddy Carter echoed the urgency. By allowing compounding pharmacies to address this crisis, he said, we will strengthen our nation's health and security without relying on hostile foreign nations for essential medications. The bill lays out in careful detail how that would work. It would allow small, state-licensed 503A pharmacies to prepare shortage drugs for urgent use in hospitals and clinics with physician certification, and to keep doing so for up to 60 days after a drug leaves the FDA shortage list. Larger 503B outsourcing facilities would get expanded authority too, with a 180-day window and annual FDA updates to the list of approved bulk substances. It also requires clearer communication. Manufacturers must tell the FDA about looming shortages or sudden surges in demand, and the agency has to listen not just to companies but also to doctors, hospitals, and patients. And every compounded drug would carry a label, making it plain: this medication has been compounded for dispensing to an individual patient and has not been approved by the Food and Drug Administration. Support has been quick and vocal. In a letter, the Alliance for Pharmacy Compounding said, pharmacists and outsourcing facilities are often the safety net when drug shortages threaten patient care. This important legislation, introduced by Congresswoman Harshbarger and Congressman Carter, gives compounders the clarity and certainty they need to keep filling those critical gaps. It's common sense legislation that ensures patients don't go without essential medications simply because of outdated or ambiguous rules. APC is grateful for their leadership in standing up for patient access. For many, this bill simply formalizes what's already been happening in times of crisis. When supply chains fail, compounding pharmacies have often been the last line of defense for patients who can't wait. This legislation acknowledges that reality and sets clearer rules for the road ahead. Whether Congress can move swiftly is an open question, but the message is clear. When the supply chain breaks, patients shouldn't be left in the lurch. This bill aims to make sure that doesn't happen.
So what they're really doing is making what has been interpreted in the FDA regulations law, not just a regulation.
And they're also going to put on the label, this drug has not been approved by the FDA.
Right.
I think that's a big point too.
So, and it opens it up and sets clear guidelines for how long the 503A and 503B pharmacies would be able to do it after a shortage is over. It also makes the manufacturers proactively report.
Well, they're supposed to proactively report in the first place.
No, they're not.
They?
They're supposed to say after it's happened. They're supposed to say it's in shortage.
We ran out.
Right.
Hey, FDA, sorry, we ran out.
It requires that the FDA listen to people other than the manufacturers. So
right, hospitals, pharmacies.
So these last 2P1 shortages with Ozempic, Mounjaro, Zepbound, and Wegovy, they really just asked Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. They went, oh, sure, you're telling the truth.
But if you ask CVS or the hospital down the street, they didn't have any.
Right.
Yeah.
So, it just hopefully will make things a little bit better. Will it actually happen? Who knows?
Who knows?
Story number 2, the news out of Denmark this week may sound like a corporate update, but for anyone who uses a GLP-1 or is curious about starting one, it's a story worth paying attention to. Novo Nordisk, the company behind Ozempic and Wegovy, has announced plans to cut 9,000 jobs worldwide, more than half of them in Denmark. On the surface, the move is about savings. Novo says the cuts will simplify its structure, improve decision-making, and free up roughly 8 billion Danish kroner, which is about 1.3 billion US, by 2026. But the bigger picture is about a company that went from being Europe's most valuable business to suddenly facing serious headwinds. Just last year, Novo's market value swelled to around $640 billion, briefly making it worth more than Denmark's economy itself. Today, that number has plunged to about $240 billion. The company's share price has dropped nearly 40% this year after disappointing sales, lowered growth forecasts, and a leadership change at the very top. It wasn't long ago that Novo enjoyed a rare position, first to market. Ozempic and Wegovy became household names, sparking demand so great that supply shortages became their own headline. That early lead gave Novo enormous influence, not just over patients, but over doctors, insurers, and even national economies. But in business, being first isn't the same as staying ahead. Over the past year, that first mover advantage has eroded. Revenues are slipping, valuation has plunged, and investors are asking whether Novo can still keep the crown it once wore so easily. Into this uncertainty steps Messier Mike Dustar, Novo's new CEO, and in his first weeks on the job, he has already made sweeping decisions. Along with announcing the layoffs, he has ordered employees back to the office full-time starting in January. The company says this will build belonging, strengthen collaboration, and accelerate execution. For Dustar, these changes are part of a larger plan to regain market share and reassert Novo Nordisk as the leader in obesity treatment. The strategy has 3 parts: cut costs, sharpen focus, and channel resources into what the company sees as its greatest growth opportunity. Guess what that is? Diabetes and obesity care. Novo has been clear that the billions saved from restructuring won't just pad the balance sheet, they will be redirected to research, production, and expanding capacity in the therapies patients depend on. For GLP users, what might seem like a business move has direct implications. Job cuts and cost savings are meant to make the company leaner and faster, but they also raise questions about stability. Will these decisions lead to more reliable supply? Will reinvestment eventually make these drugs more accessible? And how will a company in the middle of restructuring balance patient needs with investor pressure? The first-to-market edge that once felt untouchable is no longer secure. The real test for Novo is whether it can transform that early lead into long-term stability, steady supply, continued innovation, and hopefully more affordable access. For millions of us, patients treating the disease of obesity, this isn't just about boardrooms or stock charts. It's about whether the company that first brought these drugs to the world can hold on to its place at the front of the line, or whether its early advantage will slip away. So he's doing all these business cuts. He hasn't actually revealed any new strategy for pricing or accessibility for Ozempic or Wegovy.
I mean, they're still making over $1 billion a year. I don't feel too bad for them. I
No.
feel bad for the 9,000 people who got their jobs cut, and I wonder what the total employment
I don't know.
of Novo is if they can cut 9,000 and really.
I want to say that
Not
was
feel
like
it.
10% or something. I could go back and pull it. But
Yeah, I mean, when your value of your company is worth more than the country in which you are based, looking at you, Denmark, what does that tell you? Now they're not valued at that anymore, but they're still
they're basically a
valued.
third the size of what they were. So if you're in charge in your company,
What, $124 billion? Like, I think they'll be fine. Let's see if these cuts can lead to some lower prices, although they seem to be crying, we're struggling here, when it doesn't seem like you're struggling to me if you're making that many billions of dollars, but what do I know? I'm no CEO.
maybe some of the savings could be invested in price and they could accelerate their volume.
That would be also good. In story number 3, it's a question that has worried many people who use GLP-1 medications to treat obesity or diabetes. Could these drugs raise the risk of thyroid cancer coming back? At the annual meeting of the American Thyroid Association in Scottsdale, Arizona, researchers shared some reassuring news. A large study presented there found that for patients who already had differentiated thyroid cancer, or DTC, taking GLP-1s did not increase the risk of their cancer recurring or progressing. As Dr. Armando Patrizio of Pisa University Hospital in Italy explained to Metascape Medical News, we did not find a significant association between GLP-1 RAs and recurrent or progressive DTC. He added that, based on the evidence so far, these medications should not be withheld from patients with obesity or diabetes when they are medically appropriate. The study followed more than 1,000 patients at Memorial Sloan Kettering in New York, half of whom had been treated with GLP-1s and half who had not. On average, they were tracked for nearly 6 years. The results showed no increased risk for those exposed to the drugs. In fact, the data even suggested a trend toward a lower risk, though the researchers cautioned that this finding was not strong enough to be considered definitive. For patients, this is significant. Thyroid cancer and obesity are often linked, and GLP-1s may provide benefits beyond weight and blood sugar control, including improvements in heart and kidney health. Still, experts urge caution. As Dr. Ashish Chintakutlar of the Mayo Clinic told Medscape, it is heartening to see that these relatively commonly used drugs do not have any detrimental effect on the prognosis of differentiated thyroid cancer. However, this is still relatively short follow-up, and hence continued monitoring, observation, and research on such a large scale is required. It's important to note that GLP-1s remain contraindicated for patients with a personal or family history of medullary thyroid cancer. That warning is based largely on rodent studies, and questions remain about how it applies to humans. Meanwhile, other research has offered conflicting results, some suggesting a higher risk and others pointing towards possible protective effects. As Dr. Brian Hagan of the University of Colorado summed it up at the meeting, I think it is unlikely that there is an association between GLP-1 RAs and DTC. He emphasized that many of the early concerns may have stemmed from the increased testing of patients once they started these medications, leading to more incidental thyroid findings. For the millions of Americans now using GLP-1s, this study provides a measure of reassurance. It reminds us that while questions remain, The benefits of these drugs for people living with obesity and diabetes are profound. And for those managing thyroid cancer, the news from Scottsdale may feel like one less burden to carry.
So, good news.
Well, seems like good news there.
Story number 4, it's been a long time coming, but this week the Food and Drug Administration made it official. After years of watching glossy commercials fill our living rooms with smiling faces, upbeat jingles, and the promise of better health, the agency says enough is enough. The FDA and the Department of Health and Human Services have announced a sweeping crackdown on deceptive pharmaceutical advertising. Thousands of letters are going out to drug makers warning them to pull misleading ads. 100 more companies are receiving cease and desist orders. The government says the era of wink and nod disclosures and tiny fine print is over. At the center of this change is something called the adequate provision loophole. Created back in 1997, that rule allowed drug companies to provide only a quick summary of risks on screen while pointing patients to a website or a toll-free number for the full story. What that meant for most viewers was an ad showing people running through fields of flowers while a hurried voice in the background mumbled about seizures or even death. The FDA now says that was never real balance. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. put it bluntly, pharmaceutical ads hooked this country on prescription drugs. We will shut down that pipeline of deception and require drug companies to disclose all critical safety facts in their advertising. FDA Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary added that drug companies spend up to a quarter of their budget on advertising. Billions of dollars, he says, that could be used instead to lower prices for everyday Americans. For patients who use GLP-1s like Zepbound, Mounjaro, Wegovy, and Ozempic, this crackdown may feel personal. Ads for these drugs are everywhere. Laraine will sing a song.
Ozempic. Everybody knows the song.
Right, they're always on TV, they're in your social media feeds, even during the Super Bowl, and while the benefits are often front and center, the risks can be harder to find. A 2024 review showed that while every pharma social media post highlighted benefits, only 1/3 mentioned potential harms. And in today's digital age, it's not just traditional commercials. GLP-1 telehealth ads have flooded social media, making it harder and harder to tell the difference between reputable companies that provide real medical care and the fly-by-night operators that have sprung up almost overnight. That blur can mean the difference between safe treatment and being misled. That imbalance doesn't just affect perceptions, it affects prescriptions. Studies show patients who see ads are more likely to request those drugs from their doctors, and often doctors prescribe them even if they're not the most appropriate option. For people living with the disease of obesity, the stakes are real. These medications can be life-changing, but they also require medical oversight, transparency, and trust. The United States is just one of 2 countries in the world that allow direct-to-consumer drug advertising. Since the rules loosened in the late 1990s, pharma spending on ads has increased nearly 800%. Last year alone, the industry spent over $10 billion. Companies like Novo Nordisk poured more than $500 million into promoting Wegovy and Ozempic. That's money that buys a lot of airtime, but not necessarily buy a lot of clarity for patients. Critics argue that the FDA has been asleep at the wheel, letting enforcement slip to almost nothing. In 2023, the agency sent just 1 warning letter. In 2024, it sent none. But now the FDA is promising to monitor ads proactively, using technology like artificial intelligence to flag violations. Of course, this new approach will face pushback. The pharmaceutical industry points out that drug ads can raise awareness about conditions and treatments. They also argue that limiting these ads could restrict free speech and will likely mount legal challenges. Broadcasters who depend on drug ad revenue won't be happy either. But for patients, especially those of us navigating the complicated world of GLP-1s, this is about trust. When we sit down to watch television or scroll through our phones, we deserve to know the full story, not just the glossy highlight reel. Transparency matters because these medications are powerful, and the decision to take them belongs to patients and their doctors, not advertising agencies. Laraine and I certainly know how much is at stake. We've seen firsthand the difference GLP-1s can make in our own lives, but we've also paid close attention to how the story of these drugs gets told in the media. This crackdown may finally mark the moment when advertising catches up to reality, and for millions of Americans, that shift could make their medical decisions clearer, safer, and a lot more honest. I don't know, what do you think of that?
I'm all for advertising. I'm all for more information is always better. And then, and if I ask my doctor about a medication, My doctor shouldn't feel pressured to prescribe that for me. My doctor should look at my health information and talk with me and prescribe the medication best for me. So I put it back on the doctors to, even if a patient is asking for a medication, the doctor is the gatekeeper of those prescriptions. So,
I think the challenge here is that this isn't necessarily limiting advertising. What this is asking is that there is truth in advertising, and that both sides of the story are told.
Of course. What is it we always laugh at when they say, do not take blah, blah, blah if you are allergic to blah, blah, blah? We always find that funny in these drug ads. Like, why would I take it if I'm allergic to it? So some things I think are just, they're put in there because they have to be. And is it really warning people or anything like that?
Well, and it remains to be seen how all of this will roll out. So the TV and the radio are certainly the most obvious of it, but I mean, they mentioned social media. So will there be regulations that come down and impact us? Right. So do we have to say things? I don't know.
Yeah. That one commercial with that lady playing the pickleball all the time. I wonder about that.
Yeah.
Or that
lady's
man,
kind of sketchy.
Or that man sitting there cooking the salmon, talking about how much he likes food. I see those ads all the time. Are those ads going to go away?
Well, but those are interesting because they talk about a class of medication. Mm-hmm. And I think there's still a loophole in there talking about the class and not the specific. So
it's like Eli Lilly's, a lot of their ads are just kind of lifestyle focused.
Mm-hmm.
And then you see pictures of people and then it just says Lilly at the end. They don't talk about any particular drug. It's more of an awareness of their company.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what they're trying to do with that.
I don't know how you determine any return on investment.
I know the jingles for Wegovy, Ozempic,
mm-hmm.
Rybelsus had one for a while. I don't know a jingle for Mounjaro. I don't know a jingle for Zepbound, which I find interesting.
I don't know. It's an interesting marketing strategy.
I have a degree in marketing.
I know.
Haven't used it in years, or maybe I have. In story number 5, it's not often that a single person's story can send thousands of strangers rushing to their doctor's offices. But in the world of GLP-1 medications, that's exactly what we've seen. According to reporting from the New York Post, Oprah Winfrey's December 2023 revelation that she was on a GLP-1 sent a wave of patients scrambling for their own appointments. Within 72 hours, the online booking site ZocDoc saw an 18% increase. Oprah herself told People magazine, the fact that there's a medically approved prescription for managing weight and staying healthier in my lifetime feels like relief, like redemption, like a gift, and not something to hide behind and once again be ridiculed for. What do you think, JoJo? ZocDoc, as the Post explains, is a website and app where patients can book doctor's appointments online. Because of that, it's become kind of a barometer for how quickly people are acting on news like this. But Oprah wasn't the biggest spark. That came from Serena Williams. In August of 2025, just last month, she announced a campaign with telehealth company Ro and admitted she'd been using a GLP-1. Says Serena, I was never able to get to the weight I needed to be no matter what I did, no matter how much I trained, she said. It was crazy because I'd never been in a place like that in my life where I worked so hard, ate so healthy, and could never get down to where I needed to be at. The message landed, and in the days after her reveal, ZocDoc saw appointment bookings surge by 27%. Still, the biggest spike of all came from Whoopi Goldberg. In March of 2024, she told her co-host on The View, I always felt like me, and then I saw me and thought, oh, that's a lot of me. ZocDoc recorded its largest jump yet, a 29% increase in bookings. Not every celebrity has had the same impact. Kelly Clarkson's admission in May 2024 led to only a modest bump, about 6%. Meghan Trainor's announcement in March was followed by something unexpected. Bookings actually went down by 11%. Jessica Apman, ZocDoc's chief communications officer, told the Post, we have seen time and time again that celebrities influence people's health and wellness choices. When a well-known figure shares their healthcare story or experience, we often see a correlated wave of related searches and appointment bookings on ZocDoc, and GLP-1s are no exception. Still, Apman also noticed that broader factors like seasonal trends, regulatory changes, and new approvals shape behavior just as much. In fact, just before Whoopi's reveal, the FDA had approved Wegovy, for lowering the risk of heart attack and stroke. So while the numbers may rise and fall depending on who's speaking, the bigger picture is clear. Obesity is no longer just a private struggle. It's part of the public conversation, shaped by science, by regulation, and yes, by celebrities willing to share their stories. Sometimes all it takes is a voice we recognize to remind us we're not alone. What do you think, Jojo? Jojo says, oh, I like Oprah. I like that Oprah lady. And that Serena lady. And that Kelly lady. And even that Meghan Trainor lady. Because she's all about that bass. Right, Kitty? No trouble.
Story number 6, if you're a GLP-1 user, you already know the routine. Your weekly pen sits in the refrigerator waiting for that moment when you pull it out and take your dose. It's not just another pill bottle tossed in a cabinet. It's a commitment that takes planning, intention, and follow-through. Now we have new numbers that show just how many Americans are joining us in this routine. According to the Rand Corporation survey of nearly 9,000 people, 11.8%, almost 1 in 8, have already used a GLP-1. That's roughly 40 million Americans, more than the entire population of the state of California. And 14% say they're interested in trying one. The surge has been remarkable. Since 2020, prescriptions for these drugs have more than tripled. Women in their 50s and 60s are leading the way with about 20%, 1 in 5 reporting they've used a GLP-1. Younger women between 30 and 49 are more than twice as likely as men their age to have tried one. And in the 65 and older group, men actually use them at a slightly higher rate than women. But as many of you know firsthand, effectiveness comes with trade-offs. Rand found that about 50% of users report nausea and about 1/3 report diarrhea. These are the most common side effects, the ones that don't always make it into the ads or quick TikTok clips, but show up in real life, sometimes week after week. The bigger picture is just as important. While 11.8% of Americans have used a GLP-1 and 14% say they're interested, a clear majority, 74%, say they don't plan to use one at all. For many, the reasons are cost, availability, or concerns about what long-term use will look like. For those of us here at the Downsized, these numbers aren't just statistics in a report. They reflect the reality of our own adventure, weekly injections that change not just our weight, but our health and our lives. And they capture what many of you are living right now, balancing side effects, stretching budgets, and trying to make sense of a healthcare system that often makes access harder than it should be. GLP-1s aren't abstract data points. They're the refrigerated pens, the vials in our kitchen, the appointments with our doctors, and the choices we make every week. They've reshaped the weight loss landscape in America, and for millions of us, they've reshaped our lives. So the numbers just keep growing.
How many Americans? 40 million?
I think that's what it said.
That's more than we've heard reported previously.
I think that percentage is a little less. I mean, you see typically somewhere, depending on the reporting, 8 to 12%. So
yeah, but you did see that my age group, 50 to 60-year-old women, are leading the way with GLP-1
and
use.
in older men are leading women.
That's weird. 65 and older men are using it more than 65 and older women. Wonder why that is.
Hard to say.
Hard to say. In story number 7, according to new reporting from MSNBC, the Ozempic effect isn't just happening in doctor's office or on bathroom scales. It's happening on clothing racks across America. Resale stores are starting to see something they've never seen before. Larger sizes, which used to fly off the shelves, are now arriving in bulk. And the extra smalls and smalls, the sizes that often sat unsold, are suddenly in demand. Jennifer Johnson, who owns Florida's largest resale store, told MSNBC that her floor set has completely flipped. She used to long for larger sizes because they would sell instantly. Now she's had to reset her entire store to make room for the flood of bigger clothes coming in. In Kansas City, Janet Curran, who runs a resale shop that benefits local charities, says her customers are cycling through wardrobes faster. They're donating the larger sizes they no longer need as they move down with GLP-1s, then coming back for smaller clothes. She calls it a real shift, one she attributes to the rise of weight loss medications. This also hits home for me personally. I've lost more than 50 pounds on GLP-1s myself. I know what it feels like to size out of your closet, to pack up clothes that once fit, and find yourself shopping in a section you hadn't seen in years, or maybe ever. That shift is emotional as much as it is practical, and now it's starting to ripple through the fashion industry in a way we can measure. But here's the caution. This doesn't mean plus-size demand is disappearing. Avneet Singh, who runs a menswear line for big and tall customers, say men who once wore 6XL are now in 4XL, but they still need clothes that fit. And tall sizing remains just as important as ever because GLP-1s may shrink a waistline, but they don't shrink height. Fashion experts are urging retailers not to overcorrect. Professor Mallory Dunn points out that plus-size shoppers were underserved long before GLP-1s came along. And Kara Richardson Whiteley, an author and advocate, says walking away from inclusive sizing would be leaving money on the table. As she puts it, just because these medications exist doesn't mean plus-size customers don't. And then there's affordability. These drugs are still out of reach for many Americans. Until prices come down, most of the country won't have access to them, which means the plus-size market isn't going anywhere and shoppers still deserve choices. For now, store owners like Jennifer Johnson are watching in real time as closets turn over and racks reset. She told MSNBC that we're still in the early days of seeing how GLP-1s will reshape fashion. As someone who is a former clothing buyer and someone who has personally lost 50 pounds on GLP-1s, I see both sides of the story. Fashion has always been a mirror of who we are. Today it's reflecting a new reality. GLP-1s aren't just changing bodies, they're changing wardrobes, reshaping businesses, and even rewriting the story of what hangs on the rack. Interesting story. You know, the resale market is very much different from the regular clothing market, because in the regular clothing market, buyers buy to what sells. We adjust size scales based on what's selling. If those plus sizes aren't selling, there's going to be fewer plus sizes. If more size smalls are selling, you're going to see more smalls. I mean, it seems like lately when I go into my favorite store, Old Navy, and I look for smalls, I can't find them anymore. Where it used to be, I was looking for 12, 14s and extra larges, and I couldn't find those. So I do feel like I've seen a little bit of this shift in some local stores,
Sure.
but it will continue to shift.
Story number 8, obesity and type 2 diabetes are at the center of some of the most exciting science happening today. Guess what that is? That's right, GLP-1 drugs like semaglutide and dual agonists like tirzepatide. And they've already changed the way doctors treat these conditions. But now, researchers in China are reporting something new. A triple agonist drug designed to work on 3 different hormone pathways at once. Now, I know you're thinking, I've heard of a triple agonist.
Is that Retatrutide?
It is not. This one's different. A study published in the International Journal of Biological Macromolecules in August 2025 introduces GP38, a compound built from a frog peptide, Xenopus GLP-1, and engineered to activate 3 targets: the GLP-1 receptor and the GIP receptor, which are in semaglutide, obviously tirzepatide, and the Y2 receptor. Most of us are familiar with GLP-1 and GIP by now. They help regulate insulin, blood sugar, and appetite, but the Y2 receptor is a newer player in this conversation. It's activated by a hormone called PYY, released in the gut after meals, and it sends powerful satiety signals to the brain. On its own, PYY hasn't worked out. Early studies caused too much nausea. But when paired with GLP-1 and GIP, the nausea effect is blunted, while the appetite reduction remains strong. That's the logic between GP38. And in animal studies, it paid off. Compared with semaglutide and even the dual agonist cagrisema, GP38 delivered greater weight loss, tighter glucose control, and healthier cholesterol levels. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because another triple agonist is already making headlines, Retatrutide, Eli Lilly's most watched candidate. But here's the key difference. Retatrutide combines GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon. Glucagon helps raise the energy expenditure and promote fat burning, but it can also raise blood sugar and stress the liver if not balanced correctly. That's why Retatrutide has shown enormous weight loss in trials, but also comes with more complex safety profiles to manage. GP38 takes a different path. By using Y2 instead of glucagon, it leans on appetite suppression rather than energy expenditure. That could mean a drug that's easier to tolerate and more sustainable long term. Though, to be clear, this has only been tested in mice so far, not people. For patients, these different approaches highlight just how much innovation is happening. Retatrutide aims to supercharge fat burning, GP38 aims to silence hunger even further. Both go beyond today's GLP-1s and dual agonists, but in very different ways.
I mean, if it lowers hunger even more, I mean, I wouldn't be able to eat at all.
Well, it's very possible that you will be able to lower the dose of the GLP-1 GIP piece of it too. So you might actually be able to take less medication and it would reduce the side effects.
All right, well, less side effects are always good.
Yeah.
In story number 9, for many of us living with obesity, bariatric surgery has been one of the best tools available. It can change lives, giving people a chance at a fresh start after years of struggling with weight and health. But a new study published in JAMA Surgery shows just how often surgery and GLP-1 medications end up working together. Researchers at Johns Hopkins looked at the electronic health records of more than 112,000 adults in the United States who had bariatric surgery. Out of that group, 14%, that's nearly 1 in 7, went on to start a GLP-1 like Zepbound, Mounjaro, Wegovy, or Ozempic. The timing broke down in telling ways. About 21.5% of those patients added a GLP-1 within the first 2 years after surgery. Another 32% began during years 3 and 4. A quarter, or 25%, didn't start until years 5 or 6, and about 21% waited even longer. Does that add to 100? I wasn't counting. The study also revealed who was more likely to begin GLP-1 treatment after surgery. Women were 61% more likely than men. Those who had a sleeve gastrectomy were 42% more likely than those who had a bypass. And people with type 2 diabetes were 34% more likely than those without. Body mass index played a role too. For every single point higher on the BMI scale after surgery, the chance of starting a GLP-1 went up by 8%. The numbers match what we've been hearing in the downsized community. For some, surgery brought powerful results, but the weight began creeping back. For others, surgery alone didn't quite get them to where they wanted to be. That's when a medication came in, not as a replacement, but as an addition. Dr. Himakumar Mehta, one of the study's authors, said it raises important questions about timing. Should GLP-1s be considered early, before weight regain sets in, or held back as a safety net for later? The study doesn't settle that. What it does show is that a large share of patients are already combining these tools in real life. And for our viewers, many of whom know both sides of the story, the message is clear. Bariatric surgery and GLP-1s aren't competing paths. They're often part of the same path. And for the 14% in the study, and countless more outside of it, that combination has meant the difference between losing ground and holding on to hard-won success.
We've talked to lots of bariatric
Lots
patients
of bariatric patients.
I mean,
and what I seem to have gathered through talking to people and talking to doctors, is that bariatric surgery, can help dramatically reduce your weight because it dramatically cuts what you are physically able to eat. But that doesn't stop the food noise. The food noise seems to come back after a time after these surgeries. So then people start on a GLP-1 to manage the food noise. I also have seen some people on TikTok. This one man was over 600 pounds. He did the bariatric surgery first, lost like 300 pounds and kind of stopped losing weight. So the GLP-1s then took him the rest of the way. So it's important to work with your doctor and see what
the doctors that we've interviewed have talked about that sort of all the tools in the continuum of care, right? Like we may need to use multiple things.
Right.
Well, that wraps up this edition of the Downsized News. If you found it helpful, we hope that you will subscribe to our channel.
And if you're looking for things that can help you with your GLP-1 journey, visit thedownsized.org. There you'll find links to our 2026 Downsized Cruise, our GLP-1 Amazon store, and our email list. Please note we are Amazon affiliates. When you shop through our store, you're helping support our channel, The Downsized, at no cost to you. We thank you for your support.
If you haven't already, please like and subscribe this video and tap that notification bell so you never miss what's coming next. We break down the science so you don't have to and tell you the news every week. Join us to be a part of our amazing Downsized community.
I'm Laraine Durham.
And I'm Christopher Durham, and we are The Downsized. We'll see you next time.